Draft Cheshire and Warrington Combined Authority Order 2026.
Is it the wish of the committee that the two instruments be debated together? Yes. In that case, we will proceed. I will now call the Minister to move the first motion and speak to both instruments, and at the end of the debate, I will put the question on the first motion, then ask the Minister to move the second motion formally. I call the Minister to move the first motion. Minister Miato-Fambuba.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. I beg to move that the Committee has considered the draft Cheshire and Warrington Combined Authority Order 2026 and the draft Cumbria Combined Authority Order 2026. These orders were laid on the 18th of December 2025. For both the Cheshire and Warrington Combined Authority and the Cumbria Combined Authority, I'll use the term strategic authorities hereafter, unless there's a reason to be specific over the course of our debate. Devolution is critical for delivering growth and prosperity for local communities, as mayors and local leaders are best placed to take decisions that benefit their communities. This government was elected on a manifesto commitment to widen and deepen devolution across England, and the English Devolution White Paper published in December 2024 sets out our plans to achieve that. Much of the White Paper is now being taken through Parliament via the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. The White Paper also launched the Devolution Priority Programme to provide a fast track to establish a new wave of mayoral strategic authorities. Following an expression of interest process in February 2025, we announced 6 places on the programme, including Cheshire and Warrington and Cumbria. These statutory instruments will respectively establish those 2 mayoral strategic authorities and provide for their mayoral elections. In doing so, they represent substantial progress towards fulfilling our commitment to move power out of Whitehall and Westminster and back to those who know their patch best. The government has worked closely with the constituent councils within Cheshire and Warrington and Cumbria on these instruments. All the respective constituent councils have consented to the making of their instruments, and I would like to personally thank the local leaders and their councils for their support in getting us to this critical point. The instruments will be made, if Parliament approves, under the enabling provision in the Local Democracy, Economic Development and Construction Act 2009. Both strategic authorities will be established on the day after the day on which the instruments are made. The inaugural mayoral elections are due to take place for both on the 6th of May 2027, and their elected mayors will take office on the 10th of May 2027 on a 4-year term. The instruments make provisions for the governance arrangements of the strategic authorities. In each case, each constituent council appoints 2 of its elected members to be a member of the strategic authority, with the mayor also a member once in office. The strategic authority can also appoint non-constituent and associate members to support its work. The instruments provide some functions in relation to transport and economic development, but there is a strong interrelationship here with the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. Subject to royal assent of the bill, these strategic authorities will be classed as mayoral strategic authorities, and the functions reserved for their tier will automatically be conferred to the strategic authority. That is why these instruments confer fewer functions than previous instruments establishing strategic authorities. The provisions in the bill will give these strategic authorities functions on transport, strategic planning and housing, adult skills and employment support, economic regeneration, and the environment and climate change, ensuring they can deliver for their residents even in periods before a mayor is in place. Our department, MHCRG, consulted on the proposals to establish these strategic authorities between February and April last year. The purpose of these consultations was to gather evidence and information on the effects of establishing the strategic authorities and to ensure that we have local consent. We have considered these responses and on the 17th of July confirmed to Parliament that the statutory tests which are required to be met in order to establish strategic authorities in both Cumbria and Cheshire and Warrington have been met. Subject to making these instruments, both strategic authorities will receive devolved funding. This will include devolved funding for transport and adult skills. They will also receive capacity funding to support setting up the new institutions. Furthermore, they will also receive a 30-year mayoral investment fund to kickstart local economic growth and support key local priorities. To conclude, Chair, these instruments represent clear progress on our mission to widen and to deepen devolution in England and will make this a reality in Cumbria and Cheshire and Warrington. They will empower local leaders to deliver for their communities, improving the lives and opportunity of their residents. I hope the committee will join me in supporting these instruments.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Cheshire and Warrington Combined Authority Order 2026. Shadow Minister Davidson.
Thank you, Dr. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair this afternoon, and I'm sure you'll be pleased, as will the Minister, to know from the outset that the opposition does not intend to divide the committee this afternoon on these orders. However, I do have a couple of questions which I would like to put to the Minister, which to an extent are relevant to both of these, and where not, I'll just be more specific. The first is around the agreement she may or may not have reached with the Treasury around the underwriting of the 30-year mayoral investment fund. I know one of the concerns which we as an opposition have highlighted, and I know it's been shared to a degree cross-party, is that with the English devolution bill, there are various, an element of scope perhaps for new mayoral authorities to raise very significant precepts. Now clearly the feedback from a number of these authorities is that the big incentive is that central government is providing a significant additional level of discretionary funding available to that mayoral combined authority. Now clearly 30 years runs over multiple parliaments in the future, and it would be helpful to understand how the settlement is being reached with the Treasury so that that either does not disappear because of future changes of government circumstances, and if so, what the methodology has been in order that those authorities entering into this agreement have a sufficient level of assurance that that funding will continue. I'd like to ask the Minister on the point around data sharing, which is one of the new functions which is conferred by these orders. The authorities in question all have multiple different statutory functions. They are children's services authorities, they provide adult social care, a whole variety of different areas. And the primary focus of the orders is around transport. So can she tell the committee what data ring fence is drawn around those new data control and data sharing measures, so that the residents of those authorities can have a degree of assurance and clarity about what is to be shared on this footprint and what is not. May I ask the question around the precepts themselves? So we've briefly touched on the point about the 30-year mayoral investment fund. Now clearly, with transport being the major focus, the underlying assumption is that the mayor will use the new precept that they have in order to underwrite investment in those transport functions. And we know there's a great deal debate going on about the way in which transport functions across the country should develop. So it would be helpful, I think, for the committee to know what assumptions, if any, the ministry or other parts of government have made about the level of the precept and where that sits against other sources of funding, some of which the Chancellor has referred to underpin other elements of public transport investment. So to what extent is it an additional levy being funded through a mayoral precept versus what is coming from central government resources as has been announced so far. And then finally, if I may just put two questions in respect specifically of Warrington. I think members across the committee will be aware that the Minister's predecessor sent envoys into Warrington Council last summer. It's an authority which has a debt of around £1.8 billion. Now I appreciate nothing in this order of itself changes the status of that debt as something that is owned by Warrington Council, but given the arrival into this combined authority of one council with such a large level of debt compared to the others, it does raise the question, firstly, is there a risk that that mayoral precept effectively is bailing out the debt of one of those authorities? Alternatively, is Warrington going to be able, given that it will be required to contribute financially, to raise the necessary funds through its own arrangements, given that it also has envoys in place at the moment whose job essentially is to manage down that debt pile, which is extremely large compared to the overall turnover of the authority. But with those observations, which are largely about the process for reorganisation in these individual circumstances as opposed to the principle, which we do very much support, I close for the opposition.
Is there any other member who wishes to catch my eye? 90 minutes? We don't need them in that case. Minister to respond. Yes,
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I thank the Honourable Member for his point, and thank him for the cross-party support in getting through these important statutory instruments. Let me take his specific questions in turn. The 30-year investment fund, we've made a clear commitment to that, and it's worth saying that this is a commitment that the previous government made with our established mayoralties. There has been a change of government, and we have upheld that, and I intend and I imagine that our Treasury and future governments would do that. The key for us is that there is a clear pipeline that places are putting in place, and that there is government support for that pipeline, and in the way that we have approached it over the last, coming on for a decade now, with our established authorities, I hope and intend that that is the way that we as a government and our Treasury would approach it, and any future government would approach it. On the really important question on data sharing, look, there is a huge amount of work that is going on at the moment to enable and support data sharing. There are obviously some very technical barriers as well as some safeguards that we need to put in place. There are some clear protocols that govern the way that different public institutions share data. That's one of the reasons it can be quite slow and painful, but we will adhere to those protocols. My experience of this is that when it works well, it's because partners recognise that there is a common use, recognise the opportunities and the benefits for their particular area of service or investment, and are willing to work together. That's the way in which mayors have done it in other areas. That's the way in which I imagine it will continue to be done, supported by government departments where there is a common agenda and a common landing zone. On the critical question of the level of the precept, central government grants will always be part of this. And again, I would draw the Honourable Member's attention to what we are doing with our established mayoral authorities already. There is investment coming from the Department for Transport into things like Northern Rail, into particular transport schemes, alongside co-investment from mayors that may come from the precept, that may come from work that they are doing with the private sector in order to invest in their place. I imagine that this set of mayors that we'll create will take a similar approach, but ultimately it will always be a partnership between central government and our mayoralties and our regional strategic authorities, and there is no certainly commitment or intention on our side that we would undercut our strategic authorities and not work together to ultimately drive infrastructure that we care about, that they care about, because it unlocks growth and improves living standards in their area. And then finally, on the very important question that he has raised about Warrington. Now, we were acutely aware of the challenges faced by Warrington. My colleague, the Minister for Local Government, is working with all of our places where we have a debt burden that we are needing to manage. The department is working actively to support them to do that. There is no intention that the specific challenges faced by Warrington will be ported onto the combined authority, not least because a lot of those funding pressures apply to local services, and this is about economic development functions. But there is a clear commitment on our part to work with constituent authorities where there is a challenge around their public finances and a challenge around their debt in order to resolve that. To conclude, having responded to those questions, just to thank the committee for their support. These instruments deliver on a really important commitment that we have made on devolution to Cheshire and Warrington, to Cumbria. It is the next stage on our journey as we progress more places towards mayoral strategic authorities. Thank you to the committee for their support, and I look forward to working with the areas to take this forward.
It is that the committee has considered the draft Cheshire and Warrington Combined Authority Order 2026. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order.
No, next instrument.
Next instrument, sorry. Because we have two.
Cumbria.
Oh, right, okay. But it's the same debate with, yeah. Okay, we're just concluding that separately.
Draft Cumbria Combined Authority Order 2026.
Minister, to move formally?
Move formally.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Cumbria Combined Authority Order 2026. Deja vu. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I definitely think the ayes have it. Order.